Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 18th Kumpuris, wow, that's loud, the 18th Kumpuris Distinguished Lecture Series. I'm Stephanie Street, and I serve as the Executive Director of the Clinton Foundation. The Frank and Kula Kumpuris Distinguished Lecture Series is a partnership between the Clinton Foundation, the University of Arkansas, Clinton School of Public Service, and AT&T Arkansas. We are extremely grateful to the Kumpuris family for their generous gift that established this wonderful series, which allows us to bring world-class speakers to Little Rock to discuss significant global issues. Thank you so much, Kumpuris family. Tonight, we are honored to welcome one of the 2011 Nobel Peace Prize laureates, Leymah Gbowee. Leymah Gbowee was recognized for her nonviolent struggle for the safety of women and for women's rights to full participation in peace-building work. She spread a movement that acknowledged the undeniable fact that women are disproportionately affected by the ravages of prolonged conflicts. She also observed that women are uniquely positioned to force and facilitate peace and security. When her native Liberia was embroiled in a civil war, Gbowee became a leader of the Women of Liberia Mass Action for Peace and encouraged thousands of Christian and Muslim women to unite and mobilize and eventually actively confront the conflict. Gbowee orchestrated peaceful yet emotionally powerful demonstrations that eventually led to the end of the 14 years of conflict in Liberia. And in 2005, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf was elected as president of Liberia, the first elected woman leader of a country in Africa. This journey is explored further in the 2008 documentary, Pray the Devil Back to Hell. Gbowee is the narrator and central character in the film, which took Best Documentary Feature in the 2008 Tribeca Film Festival in New York. In addition to the Nobel Peace Prize, Gbowee has received the Women's E! News 2008 Leaders for the 21st Century Award, the 2009 Gruber Prize for Women's Rights, the 2009 John F. Kennedy Profile and Courage Award, and the 2010 John Jay Medal for Justice from the John Jay College of Criminal Justice. Leymah is accompanied this evening by her husband, Jay, and one of her 6 children, Nekapi. We're very excited to welcome them to Little Rock as well. I'd now like to ask my colleague, Skip Rutherford, the Dean of the Clinton School of Public Service, to come to the stage and to join us in welcoming Leymah Gbowee.
Well, thank you all for being here, and thank you, Kumpuris family. This is, again, a wonderful gift to our city and our state and to the Clinton School. We just completed about a 40-minute session where Leymah spoke and visited with our students. She met with the Clinton School students. You guys are just in for a really big treat. This is really, really something. All right. My questions aren't as good as the students, but I'll give you my best shot, okay? In 2002, 2003, after 12 years of war and an estimated 200,000 deaths, you helped activate a group of women to form a peace-building network. Can you talk about the events leading up to that action and what prompted you to take this on as a personal cause?
Thank you, and thank you all for having me in Little Rock. I asked Joe and Nick, where do you get 700 people in Little Rock to fill a hall? And they said, well, some people came from different places So I'm really humbled by your presence, and I hope we can have a good night. I was 17 when the Civil War started. And like many people who have gone through acts of violence that they had no idea of how it started or where it came from, I carry a lot of anger for many years and a lot of questions. Why me, 17, wanting to be a doctor? All of a sudden, we're internally displaced. Why my family? You know, different questions. And really, every time I thought about it, and every time one event happened, the madness just took over me. And these questions really led me to a life of not wanting to achieve anything. And then I happened onto social work because a friend encouraged me, since you're doing community work, get involved. When I started doing community social work, I met a group of women. And these group of women had different forms of physical disabilities, but they had this real happiness every time they talk about life and going back to their village. We are the change. We will make the difference. We will bring the boys back. And they would see me sit with that cynical look on my face, and most times they would ask, one day one asked, did you get raped, Leymah? And I said, no. Did you lose a body part? And I said, no. And they didn't judge, they didn't say anything. But do you know that you can make a change? Cut a long story short, that was the beginning of my journey. I started doing work with ex-combatants, and it led me to the wives of these ex-combatants who were even more violent than their husbands. Then that work led me to working with women in the security sector. But each of these different groups of women I worked with, there was something unique about the way they saw the future, not as victims. Even though some had gone through 3, 4, 5 different kinds of rape and abuse, some had lost their children, but they all had this feeling of, we can make the difference. And so in my office, we decided, I work with the church, the trauma healing program, let's add a special part for women. And this became like a journey of 3 years of building capacity, or trying, I will not call it building a capacity, but just really trying to get these women to the place where they can ignite the fire that was in them. Because I had found my fire, and the new metaphor I like to use is that we all have that bright fire to our backside, like the firefly, and something has to ignite it to make us, you know, because if you look during a very starry summer night when the fireflies are out, you see those sparks, and they really make the place beautiful. So we all have it in us, and the purpose for which we have those sparks is to make the world beautiful and to make the world a better place. So we started something through a dream called the Christian Women Peace Initiative. I had that dream. And someone says, is it a real dream, or you were sitting? I was lying on the floor, had no computer. I used to write all my thoughts and ideas in a notebook. It's here, and my kids were in a refugee situation. So I live alone. Laying back, and I just felt this chill. But in my dream, someone was actually telling me, gather the women of the churches to pray for peace. My boss was a pastor. I went to him and said, I had a dream that the women of the church need to come together to pray for peace. And so you have to call them to come together and pray for peace. And he said, no, Leymah, the dream bearer is always the dream carrier. And I said, not me, Reverend, because I'm fornicating. I am such a sinner. It couldn't be me that Jesus was talking to.
Told you.
He gave me a message for the women, but anyway, he insisted. We prayed. We started the Christian Women Peace Initiative, started the Muslim Women for Peace, and really just started different actions. But it was 2 years of mobilization, 2 years of going to the mosques, to get the Muslim women fired up, 2 years of going to the market stall to get women to forget about the market for a while and focus on peace, and 2 years of going to the churches. 2 years of intense work, training, just awareness raising, talking to women, but it was also 2 years of re-socialization of women. What do I mean by that? A lot of these women had never been socialized to believe that they had any stake in the public sphere. So most of them were a little bit afraid, ashamed. There's this one woman who's going to accompany me to Belfast this year. She's the wife of a pastor, 10 children. When I met her, she wore white. And every time I ask her, when another man is beating someone in your congregation, a wife is beating his wife in your congregation, what will you do to change the situation? She will say, pray about it. So if your husband is beating you, what will you do to change the situation? Pray about it. So I took the Bible. Faith without works is dead. That was many years of working with this woman. Today, when there is a situation in Totota County and the police is messing about, someone just whisper, Ma Annie is coming. The police will look over their shoulder to see if it is true. She is not just praying about it, she is moving into places and doing things. So over and over, and we really did a lot of crazy things in that re-socialization process. I'll just tell you some quick ones. We'll get women together, 20, 25, 30, and tell them, write your wish. Something as a woman that you've never done. One night we got a group that said they've always dreamt about taking part in a beauty pageant. So we organized beauty pageants, different shapes and sizes, but they will do that. Some will say they've never gone to a nightclub. We'll take them. One Muslim woman told us her dream was to dress up like a Christian woman going to church. So we made room for a dress, a hat, and a pair of high-heel shoes, and brought in a makeup artist. We had someone take her picture, and she told us, when I die, this is the only thing I want in my coffin. But by the time we got ready to step out in that space of protesting for peace, there was no question of, am I good enough? There was no question of, can a Christian and a Muslim work together? And there was no question of, can we really bring this peace? We didn't have the money. All we had was our commitment, our passion, and the determination that we will bring peace come hell or high water.
We were having a conversation earlier about the Boston Marathon, the bombings at the Boston Marathon, the lockdowns that followed, and you said that it brought back some very painful memories. Could you elaborate on that?
You know, so we're driving to New Hampshire to see another one of the 6 children. They're all over the place. And then the stories of the lockdown. And I had a flashback. When you've lived in a violent situation for so long, different things will trigger those events. And that just the conversation on the radio of different people calling and saying, oh, we've been in here. It took my mind back to the first time I experienced a lockdown. I was 8 years old. And then I realized that I continued to live in a lockdown situation probably every other year or every 3 years until I was 31. But then the other thing that came to my mind as I thought about this and how sad it was, I asked myself, how many people have now accepted lockdown as their way of life in Congo DRC, in Southern Sudan, in different parts of the world? And once you've gone through something like that, You don't ever want to wish it on your worst enemy. And I was just saying to the dean back there when I was 13, the second lockdown, or maybe third, my dad had been in prison and then he was freed and he came home. But we had an 18-month-old nephew, the first grandchild. And we probably did 20 hours indoors and would come out 4 hours to get your stuff and go back. How do you keep an 18-month-old down? And my dad would be like, every time this baby would say something, he would be like, someone get this fellow. And he kept saying, fellow, fellow, fellow. And my mom was like, don't you know his name? Because if the soldier hear you saying fellow, they would think we have a big man in this house. He's 18 months old, for heaven's sake. But he could not just call this baby name. He kept saying, hold this fellow, feed the fellow, keep the fellow quiet. This fellow is going to get us killed. But we've lived through that situation, and people who live in it in Boston for one day will carry that memory for a long time, because it's a horrible thing. The bombings is a totally different thing. But to be in a lockdown situation where you don't know what's coming next, that's the most uncertain thing. And for me driving, I was sad when the bombings took place, but I felt even horrible when all of this lockdown thing was happening. But like I said, it really just took my mind back to those individuals who live in lockdown as a way of life. Yeah.
When you were able to lead the effort to get the peace talks underway in Ghana, women in Liberia had been well organized, but you then said, we need to organize women at the peace talks in Ghana. And that was another very difficult task. Will you explain how you did that, how you got women in Ghana working with women from Liberia, and then your personal role in that, which was bold at the very least?
We took 7 women from Liberia to Ghana, and we went with $3,000 because we expected that the peace talks would last for a week, at most 2 weeks. And we went because we had over 10,000 refugees, Liberian refugees living in Ghana. So the idea was to go and mobilize women in a camp to join our protest. We got to Ghana very optimistic that they heard about us and they would be eager to join us. Mistake number 1. We got there and Charles Taylor had already sent women ahead of us to mobilize those women. So by the time we got in the camp, 3 different women's groups had already been there saying they were us. So you had a totally confused population of women. At one point, we thought we were going to be lynched. That's how bad it was. We had to kind of like flee out of there. So we went around the city where few women live, went through some churches, and we got a handful of women. We said, because we were working against a deadline of June 4th. That's when the peace talks were starting. So if we didn't get women in their mass to go and protest outside of the peace hall, we would have defeated the purpose of coming to Ghana. So we got few women, and then in northern Ghana, they've been going through conflict for a long time. And some of the women decided to come and join us. We didn't invite them. They heard that the peace talks were about to happen. They came. On that morning when the peace talks were about to start, as we were sitting, but we were optimistic that women would just come. So we made hundreds of T-shirts, the white T-shirts, sitting, working on our flag and our handkerchiefs and just preparing. We saw 2 buses load of women coming, and they were coming from the camp. And they said they had meetings for days. And someone told them that we were the genuine peace women. When we went to protest, what we didn't bargain for, or what we didn't imagine, that the women in parliament from Ghana would leave their parliamentary chambers and come to protest with us. So that kind of show of solidarity, and students who were coming from university just came, we handed them t-shirts, whether they were Liberians or Nigerians, they just joined us, sat and protested with us. Because there was this feeling of, we know that if something like this ever happened in any of our spaces, the women of Liberia will come and help us to deal with some of these situations. And we've done that in 2 cases, Sierra Leone and Cote d'Ivoire. We've done cross-border activism when things were not too good in those 2 countries over the last few years.
What did you do when the police said, you got to leave?
Well, the first thing first, they said they were going to arrest me.
Yeah.
Because I had ordered the women, asked the women, let's sit and lock the hall. No one is coming in, no one is going out. We'll only allow the foreigners to go out. No water will come in for the Liberians. No water will go out. And then they said they were going to arrest me. Arrest me for what? My entire sense of what the world had taught me justice was disappeared at that moment. Because I was socialized to believe that the police and the military will protect armless civilians. I was socialized to believe that men will fight to protect their women. I came from a cultural background that taught me that those who did not have arms would be protected. At that moment, no arms. I did not have a pistol, I didn't have anything, and you're telling me I was obstructing justice and you were going to arrest me? I had seen rape happen to my sisters. I had been threatened with rape. But at that moment, the last shred of my integrity, I was prepared to give it to them. I decided I would strip naked, make it very easy for you to put a prison clothes on me. So I took out my hair tie first. By the time I got to take off the skirt, they were all running. I don't know whether they were running because they didn't know what they would see or what, but we were told, and we are told that by our culture, if a woman stripped in anger is a bad omen. So they all ran. Some of the Liberian men came and put the cloth back around me. Strange thing happened though. Less than 5 minutes later, the same men who were arresting me came and said, you need to send women to the window because your men are jumping out of the window. Yeah.
Pretty bold. Okay, in the book, or the books, and by the way, I encourage everybody to read this book. Your memoir, it says, the title is Mighty Be Our Powers, How Sisterhood, Prayer, and Sex Changed a Nation at War. I got the sisterhood part. I know you started in the churches, so I got the prayer part. Can you talk about the sex part?
Well, so when we started this protest, we were desperate for peace, that we would try any strategy, anything anyone told us would work, we went for it. And so people would think that because, you know, I'm hyper and all over the place, that I invented the sex strike. But a Muslim sister was the one who said, you know what, let's do a sex strike. We will refuse our husband's sex because they are on the sidelines. And in all sincerity, we were going with a sex strike. So we told our women, no sex. So in the urban area, it was a total disaster. In the rural areas, the women were smarter than we were. They invited their men into the church and into the mosques and said to them, you know, peace is a difficult thing to fight for, and we're seeking God's face. And the Bible says we should agree to abstain. And the men agreed, and they abstained for 2 years. The mosques, the same thing. We went with our bold feminist self in the urban area, went on the radio and said, we're refusing our men's sex. What we didn't know was that just because the whole media globally is overly sexualized, it was the headlines the next day. Everyone was coming to see this group of women who were daring to refuse their husband's sex. But when they came, it also gave a kind of profile to the work that we're doing. So where media entities were ignoring us the first time, they had now heard about us, and so we became famous for the sex strike. But the sex strike, in all honesty, did not work. It was just, and it has now become a very good media strategy for drawing attention to women's plight. The women in Togo used it, and women in different places are using it now. And once they say sex strike, then my email box gets full. BBC want to interview me. Did you have something to do with these women planning a sex strike? Yeah, but it's a good media strategy. So Little Rock women, if you ever decided to change something, but at least you should have a sex strike for a week.
Okay.
Dean?
Well, I guess that's fair. I asked the question, so it's a fair point. Today, you, in visiting with our students, you used a phrase that was very interesting. You said that you were militant for peace. Can you explain more about that?
Well, so if you watch the images of the Boston bombings, the young men who planted the bombs, they boldly engaged that space without any care, set that bomb, walk off. One of the stories we read on the internet is of a man testifying that this person put this bag down at his feet, look him in his eyes, and walk away. You have all of these stories. They are militants to do terror and to create havoc on people's lives. Why should we apologize when we want peace? Why should we seek peace? So when you're a militant for peace, you're not using violence. You're using your pens, your words, to speak to the conscience of people. Rosa Parks was a militant for justice. Dr. Martin Luther King was a militant for civil rights of the black people. Mandela being in prison for 27 years was not a cowardly act. He was a militant against apartheid. But the difference between a militant for peace and a militant that is doing terror is that we will not be the cowards. We will not use violence. We'll use our words. We'll engage our space. If I want peace, I have to be able to walk into that room and say, I want peace. How do I get peace if I sat in my room and bit my nails all day and say, I want peace, I want peace, I want peace? If Obama had stayed in his house in Chicago saying, I want to be the first black president, he would not have been. He stepped out militantly, whether we like it or not, and shattered the race ceiling by being the first black president of this country. So when you want peace, and if you are a militant for peace, don't apologize. If it means walking to Ban Ki-moon and saying to him, I've seen, you know, women are awesome people. We went to the AU for a summit, and there was this woman from Ivory Coast. We were sitting having lunch, and Tony Blair passed all of the security. And next thing, she stood up, and I was reaching for her. I learned something. Madame Pocket, no. C'est pas bon. C'est bon. Fix herself, walked straight past security. When someone was trying to touch her, no. Tapped Tony Blair on his shoulder. Mr. Blair, why do you people treat Africa like this? Why do we have the wars that we have in Africa? I am from Côte d'Ivoire. And as the security were coming, she kept doing, no. I am from, and then Côte d'Ivoire, he made the mistake of speaking French. She engaged him for almost 30 minutes. He could not go to lunch. That is what a militant for peace does. Step into a space, boldly put your agenda forth, and if you get arrested, fine, but you've put your agenda forth. Don't be shy about being a militant for peace. Harriet Tubman said, and this is one of my favorite quotes, if you're hungry, keep walking. That's militancy. If you're thirsty, keep walking. That's militancy. If you want a taste of freedom, keep walking. If Harriet Tubman and those people who were fighting for the rights of the freedom of slaves had kept sitting, we'll still have the slave era.
Well, in the spirit of the Harriet Tubmans of the world, when she was First Lady, Hillary Clinton said that women's rights should no longer be separated from human rights. You said the same thing. Are we there?
We have some gains, we've made some gains, we can celebrate, but we still have a lot more to do. In this country, in other parts of the world, there's still a lot that we can do for women's rights. There are places in the world, including my own country, Liberia, where we're still struggling to get domestic violence, sexual harassment bill, and all of these different things that protects women passed. But if you look at where we came from and see where we are today, there's reason to be hopeful. Because when my mother was growing up, no one could publicly stand up and talk about female genital mutilation, the cutting of the female private parts in parts of Africa that is done. Today, I can sit on the radio in my country and say that practice is evil, and nobody will call me to order. Gains have been made. We haven't seen that practice end, but if my generation is talking about it, my 3-year-old generation will not even have it as a problem, because by the time we get to her generation, we'll probably have it abolished. So it's something. The other thing we need to understand is that people would say, you know, it's all talk. But if you look at the issues of women's rights, today, I tell people it's the decades of women. Things that we're talking about, things that are happening for women, we haven't seen. And again, the opposite side of that is some of the evils that are happening to women in parts of the world. The question is it really increasing, or is it that people are conscious and they are now reporting it more? So some of the cases of rape that they say has increased in places in the world where no one talked about it before. Is it that those cases are on the increase, or now girls who used to be afraid, or women who were raped before and never told the story to anyone, girls in those same communities are refusing to be silent. So I think we've made huge gains. People are recognizing that our rights are human rights, but beyond that, we've come to the place where I think the world have recognized that we can't shut these women up anymore.
You are a heroine to so many people. I mean, people admire you, look up to you, as you say, email you about every subject in the world. Who are your heroines and heroes? Who are the people that shaped you? Who do you look at for inspiration?
First and foremost on my list are women who live in very difficult situations but never lose hope. So I go into communities like Sri Lanka. Last year I was there. Here are these mothers. Half of them have lost 2, 3 sons, missing in action. But these are the people who are championing the cause of peace and reconciliation. And the one thing I say to myself, if they are not giving up, who am I to complain that my shoe is paining me and that I'm on some lousy flight, or that my hotel is not good? These are the people who inspire and encourage me every day and they keep my adrenaline pumping. That's the first one. The second person I would say is my grandmother. She's 93. And trust me, 101 feminism came from her. At a very young age, if your husband brought rice, bring charcoal to cook that rice. And I asked a little girl in Chicago, what do you think that statement means? And she gave me a totally different answer. Meet your word halfway. And I think that's what she taught me. Don't sit in your space and allow people to manipulate your space. Step out there, show the world what you have. I look at people, read the history of people like Rosa Parks, Mandela, King, Tutu. And I also look at someone like Shireen Ebadi. Shireen is the Nobel Prize winner from Iran. This is a woman who is fearless in advocating for the rights of people. I can just go on naming even Ma Annie that I mentored and trained. Today I look at Ma Annie and I say, this is one of my heroes. This is someone who has changed her world and changed the world's perception about her world. So everyday women making things happen, those are the people that I look up to, and some men too.
Thanks. So talk about your work today. What are you're involved with foundations. You're doing some projects all over Africa and all over the world. Talk about what you're doing today and what drives you.
Well, you see, I came from one extreme, working with women, helping them to see that there's something in them, there's a spark. And I realized there was a total disconnect between our movement and the young women who were supposed to walk in our shoes. There's a total disconnect. So today I engage more with young girls, helping them to see. I was saying to your students in the room that there is this mistiness about the Nobel Peace Prize. And if you get to see Nobel laureates, you realize that they have no mist about them. They're everyday people, you know. Jody would go to speak, Jody Williams, the American Nobel laureate, and she would take off her shoes. And she would be blunt about how she feels. I sat in a room with Archbishop Tutu as he was drinking a cup of milk. And after he drank the milk, he licked his cup, and I was like, wow. I said, this is an everyday man. Have no care in the world for who's sitting next to him, you know. And I've seen all. I'm sorry, dear.
No, I think that's good. Don't apologize. I'm enjoying this. Go on.
You know, I've seen all of these things, you know, and I think, yeah.
So when you're traveling and you're working on your peace work and other activities, what's the importance of young women going to college, and how are you encouraging that? Because I know that's a priority with you.
One of the things we do, we go into communities. So we have 3 ways of getting the foundation gives scholarship. We say 360 degrees support to educational support to girls. So we give full 4-year scholarship. We lobby with schools like the Clinton School to give free 100% scholarship, where is no cost to us or to the students coming. But also, as the students engage, we have a thing of hands-on, constant communication with them. But when students have problems with academics, we pay for tutors. And then we also, in Liberia, for those girls that we started a year ago, we have 50 now on our scholarship in Liberia. And we go into communities where some of the communities, you have one girl who have made it to 8th grade without getting pregnant in an entire community of probably 12,000 people. Or sometimes we go into community, we have 2 little girls on our scholarship who made it to 4th grade and 2nd grade, and the threshold in their community is 4th grade. All of the girls stop to 4th grade. There's no school in the community, no hand pump, no clinic. The closest school is they have to cross the river. So these little girls, during the raining season is when the girls stop. But these little girls continue and made it to 4th grade and 2nd grade. So we took them and put them into boarding school. We also have a policy, once you're on our scholarship, you have to go back into your community during the summer to do some kind of work. For us, it's important that there is a connection with your community. So those of our students that are nursing students, they have to go and work in a clinic in their community. Not only are we giving them the education, but we're also giving them that exposure to leadership and keeping them connected to their community so that they have their hands on in some of the things that they've done. And really, I've seen in a year, some of these girls that we've worked with stand up to some of the pressure from their family for early marriages. I had a meeting with 25 of them early March. And I was shocked to see that in this day and age, parents are still telling their children, I had just one daughter, and I want you to start having children now. And some of these girls are saying to them, no, I want more for my life. And my life is not to have children or have you inherit my children. My life is to, so we've seen that kind of thing. But beyond that, we've also seen them step up in their different schools where they've never really been involved in the political life of schools. Some of these girls are coming up and standing up and saying we want to be. I think in order for, if we must live a world that is equal, if we're advocating for equal rights for women and men, if we do not have the educated women to really match the number of educated men, we'll have a serious problem. Even though one of my uncles think contrarily, he said to me once, continue to educate your girls and they will marry our own educated boys. And I say, I have no apologies for that.
What do you think America's role is, as you've seen from the outside looking in, but you obviously have spent a lot of time in America, in terms of aid to Africa, in terms of the role of educating and elevating women in the world? What do you think America's role is and should be, and where do you think we've gone right or gone wrong?
Dean, my visa is about to be renewed in 2 weeks. Do you want them to revoke my visa?
Hey, you took your clothes off in an Orient, what's a visa? This is, no, I don't want them to revoke your...
Well, you know what? I always say you have two options, refuse me or deny. I mean, refuse me or give it to me. If you say you won't give it, that's your loss. In any case, one of the things that I've seen as I've grown up is the billions of dollars that the U.S. have spent in developing countries on aid. Some of the aid, I would think, totally unnecessary. I believe that, and this is the metaphor I like to use about development or about engaging peace or about bringing about any change in any society. You walk into my house, I have a problem, or I invite you that I have this problem. And instead of allowing me to drive the change that should happen in my house, you walk in and say, this is where I think the problem is. This is where I think the problem is. You spend 10 years in my house, changing the sink, remodeling my kitchen, changing my kids' school, buying me new sets of clothes, and my neighbors are standing out watching, and they're saying, lucky Leymah, she has it all made. I'm sitting there, not saying anything because I'm dependent on you. I'm afraid to speak because financially, I cannot do it myself. So I go with the flow for 10 years. And 10 years later, you pull out. 2 months later, the problem persists, or the problem comes back 10 times more. Because all you did was to suppress that problem. Flip it on the other side. Someone walks into my house, there is a problem, and they say, let's talk about this. How can we make this change? How can we help you? And then I start outlining, this is the problem, this is the problem, this is the problem. And so how do you think we can solve this problem? And so where one person came for 10 years and spent $50 billion, and 2 months after they left, nothing happened, someone came and allowed me to drive that change. And 10 years later, I'm still living comfortably. Most of the time, this is what we see. That's one. Two, when they count, we've spent $200 billion in this country on aid. Please try to do the subtraction on the staffing cost, the housing cost, the Medicare for the staff, and all of the different things. You realize that they probably spend $20 million in actual sense on that community. And I think really sending people behind money who will do nothing, most times write report, do some work, and hang out at all of the local bars. It's true, I'm sorry. Whilst I respect a lot of work that aid workers do, 50% of some of them in those aid fields are doing nothing but holidaying. The local staff do half of the work, they take all of the credit. I came to school to do my graduate study, and there's this Black American boy who became my son, African American. And one of these days, I'm sitting in class and sleeping with my head. And then he whispered to me, "Black woman, why did you leave your children to come here to go to school? Go back to your children." I woke up, and this is like 1 week into that school. So I don't really know anyone, and no one really knows me. Turn around, walk around his seat. We have Liberians in the room. Gave him one solid slap on his back. And told him, "I'm here because I don't want you to go back to my country and be my boss." Afterwards, he knew better than to mess with me, so today he calls me auntie.
Ladies and gentlemen, this remarkable woman has changed the world, and we are honored that she would be here with us for a Kumpuris lecture. And before she leaves, I'm going to ask her to walk down so that you all can come by and shake her hand. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a wonderful round of applause for Leymah Gbowee. You're going to walk down here.
All right.